I really want to be super clear in separating out the points, right? If what that article alleges actually happened, then that could be Susie Wolff, Frederick Vassell. Like, I don't care. That is an infringement of professional ethics. It is related parties and conflict of interest. Apps, I don't care who it is. Have they chosen those particular people to undermine the absolute competence and talent of a Susie Wolff? Potentially. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown. It is the 7th of the 12th, 23, and with me as always, my co-host, the legends, my brothers, Baxty and Shez. How are we doing, chaps?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Yeah.
You're all right. You're all right. Good man. Good man. Can me do my best Birmingham accent like I still have it? You're all right. Come on then, lads. Let's talk some F1 because there's been lots going on over the last 48 hours. For those of you F1 fans around the world who have been hiding under a rock over the past 48 hours, it has kicked off massively. Where do I go to first? First and foremost, if my memory serves, there is an article, Business F1 Journal it's called, originally founded by one chap called Bernie Eccleston, and they publish an article that outlines a perceived infringement of the FIA rules on the grounds of Toto Wolff and Susie Wolff, his wife, and again F1 Academy head promoter or something like that. Toto Wolff obviously being team principal of Mercedes-Benz AMG Petronas, on the grounds that they've been crossing Chinese walls, i.e. sharing information that they shouldn't be. And again, this article goes into various detail. There is a picture. The headline is Pillow Talk, and there is a picture of a Photoshop picture of Susie Wolff on one side that she looks like she's on a settee or a bed of some sort, and Toto Wolff on the other side kind of lying down. Headline again is Pillow Talk, implying once again that Susie Wolff has been talking about the FOM secrets to team principal Toto Wolff. Now the implication there being that there should be a clear there's schemes of delegation, that there should be a dotted line between everyone that's F1 and everybody that's FIA, because the FIA are a governance and a regulatory arm, and the TPs are more concerned with or more aligned, I suppose, with the commercial side of the business, or the racing side even. So the FIA and the commercial side should be, in my mind, two different entities. And then soon after, we get every single one of the teams publishing tweets saying they're basically saying they had nothing to do with this as far as the complaint. So in fact, let me take a step back. The article outlines that one team principal, an unnamed team principal, has complained about Toto Wolff and the way in which he's talking. It sounds like he's got information potentially that he shouldn't have. And where did he get it from? The implication, of course, being that he got it from his wife, Susie Wolff. Now, that was a formal complaint, it says in the Business F1 Journal, whatever it's called. The response from all of the teams currently on the grid was to issue verbatim a statement saying that they haven't put forth any official complaints. Basically, I don't know anything what they're talking about. Each of the teams issued the exact same word for word statement. It gets very techie. And then we get Toby Brewer today or yesterday saying that he's had a word with a few team principal, and at the previous meeting between all the team principals, there was nothing of the sort. Toto Wolff hadn't said anything to indicate he knows additional information that the team principals do not. Baxty, I'll come to you first, bro. Unwrap this for me. It's very techie, right? And there are lots of threads at which we might want to pull. Let's pedal back to the first. Let's talk about the article in the first instance. When you read the article, what was your reaction to it, bruv?
Excuse my language. I thought it was a load of bullshit. it just seemed like implausible. You all three of us here are married. We do different jobs to our partners, and there are certain things about our partners' jobs that we don't know because it's not really in our interest to know, and therefore, we don't need to. Similarly, the other way round, and it's you know, it, why would I mean, surely Formula One management would have vetted Susie before they even gave her the job in the first place. I mean, come on, they're not incompetent fools. Formula One management, they know how this works. You vet somebody, and they realize that there is a potential risk in taking on the wife of a very prominent team principal, but considering she is the perfect person for the job, and you can trust her to not share information that she probably isn't privy to in the first place. That there's one thing to look at, and then the other is just this implication that it's only Toto and Susie. How many different relationships do we see? How incestual is Formula One in terms of people moving teams, and you've got 7 factories within a certain mile radius within each other, and and you're telling me that there's no information shared there, like confidentially off the books. I mean, come on. It's this sport is mired in it, should we say, mire in conflicts of interest all over the place. But somehow Susie says something to Toto and everything blows up. It's like, come on now, this is a bit silly. And this article's rubbish when there's no journalist attached to it. There's no name attached to it.
Deliberately incendiary, some may say. Shez, talk to me about this article, bruv, and talk to me about the perceived related party / conflict of interest implication.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, it was one of those 48 hours in F1 where social media is where all of the news is coming from. So it was brilliant. Like, you were picking it up as it was happening, and then you were waiting for the big news outlets to actually report it. So it was good fun to keep up with that, even if it was an ungodly hour for me. And it was one of those rare instances that elicited a unified response from every single one of the Formula One teams. How often do we see that? Really, not very often at all. So all of that was pretty compelling stuff. In terms of the article itself, so Baxty, you said that we do different jobs to our partners. I actually do exactly the same job as my partner, and actually, this is something that we potentially could struggle with, because we deal with patients that about whom there is confidential stuff, but there are things that we talk about the cases that we see, without naming names, without naming anything that might identify a patient or a person that was attached to that patient, whatever. Generalizations do cross boundaries, right? There's no way you can help that. But what was interesting here was that the article was talking about specific events, and that's what could be picked up as a problem. So I don't think that there was an issue with the fact that Susie and Toto might talk about stuff that happens in their jobs. It's about whether actual confidential information was passed between one and the other and was then passed on to a third party. I think that has some merit. That is something that potentially needs to be investigated. So if an actual confidential bit of information has been leaked between the two of them, that potentially does need to be investigated. My problem with this, though, is that the FIA have jumped on something, and if you look back at their statement, the original statement from the FIA is: the FIA is aware of media speculation centered on the allegation of information of a confidential nature being passed to an F1 team principal from a member of FOM personnel, right? So what they've done is that they've taken an article in a magazine. It sounds like they haven't vetted it, and they've just immediately hit the nuclear button and gone straight for an investigation. And what I found really, really interesting about this was the race did a video about this afterwards, and there was a line in the middle of it that, I mean, I'd wondered why Autosport and the race hadn't been reporting on this earlier, and the reason they hadn't is because look, they're not going to report on something unless they can get verification from sources within the paddock that they trust. What is really silly is that the FIA haven't done any of that, and without vetting anything, they've just gone, right, this means something bad happened. We have to open an investigation and make it as public as possible. That sounds like complete lunacy to me.
I just want to respond to that because if you guys don't know Jeppe Ollesen, he did a big long tweet about this earlier, and he just said that the FIA does not require a formal complaint from an F1 team to initiate a compliance investigation, which sounds bonkers when you read it. But he basically said the FIA does not require a formal complaint. Any large organisation will have to respond if there are persistent or strong rumours of wrongdoing. In this case, it looks like it all kicked off due to an article from a certain outlet that has a history of making inflammatory and outrageous claims. Add to that a few stories that have come out which have either been misconstrued or taken at face value, which in fairness is what compliance teams exist to clear up. It is quite possible that the investigation was initiated within the FIA itself and not by any entity in Formula One. So it seems to me like they've seen that there's a bit of a social media frenzy happening around this article, and they've decided to jump on it and not realize that it was probably going to blow up in their face when you've got the woman at the center of it going, this is completely wrong, and this is misogyny in action. You had the other 9 teams, all of whom were under the microscope, going, yeah, it wasn't us, Gov. All with the same statement as well. I mean, it wasn't like, it's almost like Formula One management sent them, please release this, put your own graphics on it, but just release it, which then led to every Twitter user under the sun also using the same statement, which I thought was very funny. One thing we have to clarify here is that the FIA and Formula One management are 2 completely separate entities, just for the avoidance of doubt. So the FIA are the guardians of motorsport around the world in general. They oversee many different categories. They oversee Formula E, WEC, World Rally Championship, which is where Ben Sulayem competed during his racing days. But you don't necessarily have to be affiliated with them to be like a check. You can run a championship and not be affiliated with the FIA. It's just that the FIA are, it's nice to have the name on, and they have certain rules that can help you get everything set up and everything else. Formula One management is purely there to run Formula One. That's Liberty Media. So that's where Stefano Domenicali comes in. That's who Susie works for. She doesn't work for the FIA. She works for F1 management. That's where Ross Brawn worked previously as well. Like, completely separate entities. And so that's why people were saying, well, hang on, why are the FIA investigating? Because this technically has nothing to do with them.
Well, Baxty gets so techie. I want to take a step back and address something. Let's imagine in a world, so Toby Greer's basically verified that this is Fugazi, it didn't happen. But let's imagine that he doesn't tweet that out. Let's imagine in a world, hypothetically, and nobody was in the room when it happened, not a team principal, not one of us at least, or any journalists or passers-by or innocent observers. However, let's imagine a world where something was said. Let's take Susie Wolff out of it because we're going to address the misogyny in a minute. But let's imagine that an employee of FOM had a chat with a team principal and had given them information, because I think the reason why this blew up massively, and FIA absolutely need to hold themselves to a higher state of account than an auto sport or the race. That feels a bit wrong to me, that journalistic integrity is higher than regulatory in this instance. That's bonkers. But again, let's not talk about the FIA, burn them at the stake this episode. In a world where that does happen, let's say, for example, Shayla and Rao gives Toto Wolff some information, alerting him preemptively about an apparent cost cap infringement at the Singapore Grand Prix last year, and Toto Wolff goes in front of the world's press and lets it be known that he has this piece of information that he shouldn't have, because the FIA, the investigator of all this stuff, hasn't made it public yet. So that whatever way you want to cut it, yeah, that's a perceived advantage that Toto Wolff, as a team principal, shouldn't have at that time, right? How does he have that information, and should FIA investigate it? That I think is really, really important, and that speaks to me, Shez, to what you just talked to about redacted names around conversations that you'll have with another clinician, right? This is really, really important, and it's okay. So maybe there is a question, if this has happened, maybe there is a question of misogyny. But let's say Susie Wolff is a man. I want to take misogyny out of it. Related parties and conflicts of interest it's a very serious thing, you know, across whatever industry, whether it's banks, whether it's healthcare. You can't, I said this on Ahmed's Space the other day, Baxty, sales traders can't talk to the back office. Like you can't, or at least they can't, they're obviously going to chat and have a beer and stuff, but you can't talk about like specifics, because then that's when you get bloody Enron and the likes of, because the sales trader will influence the middle office and the back office, and it's those two waters shouldn't mix. And it concerns me, that it has concerned me for the longest time. I did a video around 2021. Yeah, I remember seeing a photo of Ross Brawn talking to Mohammed bin Sulayem, and I remember looking at it thinking, hold on, this is a flat like that. There should be a massive, humongous Chinese war between those two. I don't even want to see them talking, not in the paddock, really. I feel like there should be a big separation between the two, and of course, owing to the way that the Concorde is, it's always going to be a bit. Those lines are always going to be a tad blurred, but I just don't think they've got it right. FIA as well, coming out and reacting. They're more concerned about seeming than the substantive of their role. Hence why they come out and issue this. If go away and bloody investigate it behind closed doors, and then announce your findings after you've done your investigation. When you do something like that, you're not. They're too invested in PR and not invested enough in substance at the moment, the FIA, and that concerns me as a reg body. Let's talk to the misogyny very quickly, lads. Shez, is there, as you read the article, there's so many different bloody ways we can take these chats, but misogyny's been a word that's been thrown at this quite a lot in the last 48 hours. Talk to me about, did you see in that article, if again we're taking it at face value and understanding that what it says actually happened, did you see any misogyny in that article, Shez? A very loaded question, I realise, bro.
The short answer to that is yes. So there were a couple of quotes in there, especially towards the end of the article, where apparently one of the team principals had mentioned that if Raquel Stroll or Jerry Horner were working at FOM, that should be illegal. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. So that I have a problem with, right? What you can't do is define somebody's job as a function of who they're married to. That can't be a reason. That, you know, you shouldn't have to put on your resume, I am married to this person, therefore I cannot, therefore you're not allowed to be in a job. My issue here isn't about the generals. It's not about a generalization, right? It's up to the organization itself to have proper checks and balances to make sure that confidential information isn't shared between the parties that shouldn't have it. So that's up to the FOM and the team principals to do that. It's not, what can't happen is that you can't say that somebody is married to somebody else, therefore they cannot have a job within a certain organization. The specifics can't happen. So you can't. So if there is a specific instance where a piece of information, so the Shaila and Rao thing, I think is a case in point, that where I think Toto's absolutely thrown her under the bus, because that can't have come from anywhere else.
That's what I'm saying, Shez.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So if the potential is there for that to happen, then those organizations need to tighten up the way that they share information between themselves. So yes, there might be potential, but you can't stop someone having a job because of that. That's where the misogyny comes into it, saying that someone's either got a job because they're married to somebody else, or they can't have a job because they're married to somebody else. That I don't think is fair. But if there's a specific instance where something has been said and information has been leaked, that warrants an investigation. Absolutely.
100%. But the article then, Shez, and here's where it gets techie. I understand, and we've been back and forth on Twitter Spaces around this. I understand that there is a sort of sleight of hand around the language of misogyny and racism in 2023. I understand it. Oftentimes it masquerades, it takes a different form. I get that. But if we're going to take the article at face value, I felt that the article was articulating a point around related parties and conflicts of interest. And that, okay, so it's a bit tone deaf talking about Jerry Horner, Nee Halliwell and Lawrence's miss. I think that's it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, and absolutely it does the competence of Susie Wolff a disservice. You can't even mention, in racing terms at least, you can't mention those people in the same sentence or paragraph as Susie Wolff. However, if the focus is on related parties and the inherent conflicts of interest that are born of having one half of a famous couple heading up a racing team, an F1 team, and the other half of that couple, I was going to say in bed with then, and again I was going to get smashed for misogyny. The other half of that couple working for an organisation, and they will be privy to information that could influence the competitive landscape of said series, then I think that in and of itself it's not necessarily an issue until it's acted upon. Until then, you hear Toto Wolff at the meeting saying, oh well, I've gotten word, I understand that Red Bull are being investigated for apparent breaches of the cost cap, ahead of even the FIA talking to those points. That's a problem, Shez. So I agree with you, bruv. Here's the problem. The conflict of interest isn't... If you have letters after your name or you're involved in high-level sport, you are at the behest of a code of conduct, right? That I think you will always... We know that F1 has always been incestuous and will always be. There are only bloody 10 teams on the grid, for crying out loud. So if you earn your corner F1, then you're going to leave that team and go to another team, and you're going to share secrets. It happens on the grid. But the second that it becomes obvious that that's happened, the FIA, being the regulatory body, need to come down and root that out, because it's not fair. They're responsible for the competitive landscape and the sport being run in a fair and true manner. Toto Wolff comes out and makes it clear that there has been a breach of that professional code of ethics. Then they've got to do something about it. And again, this is all assuming that the article is on the money, Shez.
But that was the problem. The article didn't mention a specific bit of information. It didn't mention a specific team principle, and it very quickly went into generalization about wives and partners of particular individuals shouldn't be able to get jobs. It's illegal. I mean, they even used the word, it should be illegal. And that's where I have a problem, because they weren't talking about specifics. And that I think is why the FIA have come in for so much scrutiny, because what you can't do is just based on a generalization say, I'm going to go and investigate someone for something that...
Agreed.
That article didn't mention a specific. And just to your point, you know, in my profession, if my wife ended up, you know, head of the GMC or something, and I'm medical director at a hospital, you could argue that those are conflicts of interest, but nobody's going to say that my wife can't be head of the GMC.
But there's only a conflict of interest when your wife shares the secrets, and then when you
correct.
It's almost like if a tree falls down in a wood and nobody hears or sees it. Did it really?
Correct. So, but that's the point that we're trying to make here, isn't it? It's not that It's not that Susie Wolff shouldn't have a job at the F1 Academy. Absolutely, she is the right person for that job, and she should be in that role. But if she has actually said something to Toto that gives him a competitive advantage, and you can verify that, then yeah, that needs to be investigated. But just saying that she can't be in that job because she's his wife, that is misogynistic, and it is doing her a massive disservice. And I think if based on what was said in that article, I can completely understand why she made the statement that she did and why everybody's backed out of it, because there was no specific in that article at all.
Fair.
And there was no verifiable data that the FIA could then go after, but they did anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you, brother. It's not fair in that sense, and because it's without foundation. Again, I understand why people are saying that it's the language of misogyny and all that other stuff. But again, if you're going to take that at face value, then there's an underlying truth in there as far as if it let's say we're not talking about this Fugazi example that hasn't happened apparently per Toby Brewer, but let's say we're talking about 2021 and the cost cap stuff, then absolutely that's worthy of an investigation, because you're artificially distorting the competitive landscape. The market has been impacted by the conflict of interest, and there somebody needs to get punished or penalised. Baxty, talk to me about this, bro.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, there are so many instances that should have been investigated. I mean, Mohammed bin Sulayem should have been investigated himself when he was like, "Oh, I don't think Formula One is worth 20 billion." How do you know that? That's some confidential information right there.
But
there's also
Baxter.
the relationship between Red Bull and AlphaTauri. There's should you not investigate a potential conflict of interest when Peter Bayer, who was heavily involved with the FIA, is now CEO of Team Faenza or AlphaTauri or Racing Bulls or whatever they're going to be called? We'll find out on Sunday. There's a potential perceived conflict of interest there. I want to give a shout out to Double Wave Yellow, who's a regular in my spaces and currently doing the Lucky Suns takeover. And he said that one of the reasons why this smacks of misogyny is he gave a brilliant example from ice hockey where I can't remember the name, so please don't hammer me in the comments over this, but basically a former female player works on the in-house broadcast team for one of the teams. She is more than qualified to do that job. She's a high-level ice hockey player, won like 3 Olympic gold medals or something. But then the press in America in NHL press basically started saying, "Oh, well, she's doing broadcast for a team that her husband's involved in. How can she possibly be impartial?" At which point, most reasonable folk turned around and said, "Well, what about that guy working on that team's broadcast? Whose dad works for another team. So how can he possibly be expected to commentate objectively on any game that involves his father's team?" It's just like,
bro.
It's just like you're only raising that because that particular person happens to be a woman.
100%.
And it seems to me like this case is being raised partly because it's like, well, there's a marriage involved. We've got Susie Wolff, and obviously it's because Toto allegedly said something in a meeting. So clearly it must have come from Susie. Despite the fact that we know that the cost cap information came from somebody completely different.
Yeah, it's techie, Baxty, and this isn't me by any means saying that there's not misogyny and racism and injustice in F1.
Yeah.
I think F1 is a breeding ground for the aforementioned, like 100% still in 2023. Things are getting better, but they're not best by any means. I just think when we're banding around, and I said this, when we're talking about misogyny and racism, I really want to be super clear in separating out the points, right? If what that article alleges actually happened, then that could be Susie Wolff, Frederick Vassell. Like, I don't care. That is an infringement of professional ethics. It is related parties and conflict of interest. Apps, I don't care who it is, man, woman, I really don't care. Like, I think they're two separate entities. Now, is misogyny, if an unnamed team principal or Bernie or whoever else, are they using Joey Halliwell to leverage? Have they chosen those particular people to undermine the absolute competence and talent of a Susie Wolff? Potentially. Also true. Again, remember the context of F1 and the nature of the people who speak truth to these type of statements. Probably. Listen, let me talk to some. I'm gonna tangent, chaps, because I know we're running short on time as we round third base. Maxim, I'll come to you first, bruv, because I think there's a bigger thing that I've missed in all of this misogyny and conflict of interest talk. The statements of each and every single one of the teams read something like this: we can confirm we have not made a complaint to the FIA regarding the allegation of information of a confidential nature being passed between an F1 team principal and member of FOM staff. I love the way they're not naming everything. It's very legal team involvement. Absolutely. We are pleased and proud to support F1 Academy and its managing director through our commitment to sponsor an entrance in our liveries from next season. Bruv, Baxty, let me ask you this question now. Are we looking at the beginnings of a separate formula here? Is the coordination and that each and every single one of the teams wording in the statement are twins, exactly the same? Is this the start of something deeper? Are we watching a Braun type situation where these teams could potentially break away?
So split from the FIA and do their own thing, essentially, is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay, so possibly, I don't think it would get to the level that we saw with 2009 and FOTA. I suspect what will happen is that Formula One management will turn around and go, maybe this relationship isn't worth it. And then conveniently, Ben Sulayem will all of a sudden say, oh, well, I probably should resign. And then everything will be fine. I mean, I don't see how he survives this, to be honest with you. If you've been reading Andrew Benson the last few days, he basically said that even though MBS said he would take a back step from all things Formula One in February, he hasn't been doing that. Apparently, the investigation into Lewis crossing the track in Qatar came about from personal intervention from MBS. Apparently, Fred Vasseur and Toto getting called in at Abu Dhabi for swearing in a press conference. That was because of MBS. Like, it's knowing when to pick your battles. That's what we said before. Yeah, when he was putting his foot in it at the beginning of this year, we were just saying, know when to pick your battles, mate. And he just doesn't seem to know how to do that. When the season's going on, he's fine and might say the odd stupid thing, as he often does. But when the season's off, it's almost like he comes into his own, and we could end up with, it's the prize giving in Baku tomorrow, we could end up with another cringe presentation to Christian Horner. I could get
100%, bro.
The thing is, this is also an image problem for MBS, because let's not forget earlier this year he got hauled over the coals, and rightly so, for previous comments he made about I don't like women who think they're smarter than me, or something to that effect. It's like, and now this has happened under his watch, even if maybe he just felt like he was just doing a due diligence thing and everything else. You got to think of the potential ramifications of things, and people are going to put two and two together, and they're going to make connections. And this whole situation has just been a complete disaster for him. As I said, I don't know how he will survive this unless he gets enough support from other motorsport series saying, no, we want to keep him on board. But at which point Formula One management and Liberty might then get serious about pulling away. But at the moment, to answer your question, I don't think this is the beginning of something in terms of a split. I think it's probably more likely the beginning of the downfall of Mohammed Ben Sulayem.
Baxley, did you just say MBS and consider ramifications in the same sentence?
Yeah, it's wishful thinking, isn't it?
just a tad, bro. Just a tad. Shez, talk to me about this beginning of a separation formula, or will everything be all right this time in 2 or 3 months' time, do you think?
I mean, I don't know if everything's going to be okay, but there's been a simmering, not even under the radar, but there's been a sort of cold war, hasn't there, between F1 and the FIA ever since the change of regime after Abu Dhabi in 21. And before anyone brings it up in the comments, that's just when it happened. I'm not trying to bring up that whole thing again, but
yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm not responding to any of those comments this time. But there's been instances, haven't there? So back to you outlined the 20 billion, the 20 billion one. There are the differences of opinion about how Abu Dhabi should have been handled. There was the
Shez, can I? Sorry, bruv, to interrupt you. Can we talk about this 20 billion? Because what the 20 billion thing wasn't as bad as this. If indeed it did happen, the 20 billion was just him almost talking out of turn, meddling in business that wasn't. He is the regs, the governance, the competitive landscape. The FOM are the commercial arm. That's not really your business, bruv, to try
exactly. So that's why he shouldn't have been talking about it. That's what I mean. It's not for him to. But it's because he has influence, doesn't he? It is like insider trading. So fair. If you're talking about the stock exchange, if he says something like that, it can potentially lower the market value of that property, and it did, didn't it? Yeah. So actually, he had a verifiable impact on something when he shouldn't have.
True, but it's techie, this thing, you know, Shez. It's like Elon coming out and talking bad about Tesla, isn't it? It's almost like sabotage, but it's not.
Yeah, but he doesn't. And I agree, it does mess with his own. It does cause a problem with his own revenue stream. I haven't even finished it. To the big one this year was the whole Andretti and FIA thing. Where they've approved Andretti and just put F1 and the teams in a difficult position. And I think there's issues on both sides of that. And nobody's going to come out of that smelling of roses. But that's another instance where there's been needle between the FIA and F1. And back to you really eloquently talked about what the separation is between F1 and the FIA. The FIA do still own the commercial rights. They essentially lease them out to Liberty. And that's based on this 103-year lease that was given to Bernie back in 99. But it means that those two entities are still intricately linked. When you talk about Chinese walls between the two of them, I don't think there ever can be because actually they're not completely separate. But the issues that are happening right now, as you say, Baxty, I think are very much specific on one person who's not playing ball. Because as an entity, the FIA are actually doing lots of good stuff. the restructuring of the single seater sort of commission, the way that they've brought in people from F1 to run how they're framing regulations in the future, all speaks to an organization that are forward planning and are getting in the right people, the right resources to do the job correctly. But everything that is happening that is good is being undermined by someone that is trigger happy. That's the only way that I can really describe it. Something happens and he immediately needs to make a response, whether that's because he thinks that's what he's supposed to do, or because he's trying to make a point to say that the FIA are still the ones in charge. That when you're running a business where you need to be in symbiosis with the other parts of this organization, with F1, is not the way that you're going to work. These two entities need to work together, not be at loggerheads all the time. And if the loggerheads are happening because of Mohammed bin Sulayem, and it seems to be that that's what it is, he has to go. And I think that's why I agree with Baxty that this is very much about him and not about the teams and F1 saying we want to leave the FIA. And just to that point, sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm going on a bit, but just to that particular point, can you imagine Ferrari and McLaren and Mercedes all racing in a series that isn't regulated by the FIA, that doesn't come with that stamp of approval? It doesn't have the same cachet, and it works both sides. The FIA can't have a championship without Ferrari. Ferrari, I don't think, would be able to run in a championship that doesn't have an FIA stamp on it.
It's a good shout. Baxty, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think one thing that's very important to acknowledge here is that I think the FIA has an F1 problem in that how often yes, okay, we predominantly follow Formula One even, but we know people and we do see other areas of motorsport that the FIA is in charge of and see what's going on there with World Rally Championship, WEC, Formula E, for example. And yet we don't see anything like the issues that we see from Formula One. This seems to be a unique phenomenon to Formula One. And one of the reasons why Mohammed bin Sulayem was elected was because he was not going to be so Formula One focused. Yes, Formula One is kind of the crown jewel of the FIA, but you've got other areas as well. And I think he, being a former rally driver, he brought that greater representation of that, because apparently Jean Todt did not endorse him. I didn't realize this, but Jean Todt didn't want him to get the job. So I feel like the FIA just seems to sleepwalk from one problem and to another in regards to Formula One, but in other areas they're absolutely fine, and as Shez put it, doing brilliant work and keeping everything in check and doing what a proper regulatory body should. It just gets to Formula One and everything goes to pot.
Oh, chaps, it's not good enough. And yet again, it feels like we've done another podcast whose subject topic in pole position was like the FIA and incompetence corresponded. For the avoidance of that and for a bit of balance, I'm going to read out Susie Wolff's statement that's kicked all of this legal or preemptive legal proceed or preemptive legal defensiveness from these teams. I am deeply insulted but sadly unsurprised, bloody Nora, already you know what's coming is going to be nukes, isn't it? By the public allegations that have been made this evening. It is disheartening that my integrity, Susie continues, is being called into question in such a manner, especially when it seems to be rooted in intimidatory and misogynistic behaviour and focused on my marital status rather than my abilities, bloody Nora. Throughout my career in motorsport, I have encountered and overcome, bloody Nora Susie, numerous obstacles, and I refuse to let these baseless allegations overshadow my dedication and passion for F1 Academy. As a woman in this sport, Susie continues, I have faced my fair share of challenges But my commitment to breaking down barriers and paving the way for future generations to succeed remains unwavering in the strongest. There we go. There's the nick. In the strongest possible terms, I reject these allegations. Legal papers pending. Bloody Nora, chaps. It's techie, isn't it? In brackets. It's very, very techie. But fair play, Susie. She's not having it at all, and she shouldn't have to have it. Maybe Susie is the person to make a difference in F1 going forward and ring in the changes of diversity and re-race of one that the likes of MBS have been talking about without getting much done. I don't know. Take you chaps. Right, lads, on that bombshell, I'm going to end our latest FIA diatribe. It's been very bloody techie, eh? But you guys have been legends. From co-host Baxty, for co-host Shezinho, I have been your boy Cameron F1. Do me a favour, if you are listening on a podcasting platform, scroll to the top, leave 5 stars, por favor. If you are watching us on the YouTubes, do me a favour, like, subscribe, comment. It all helps at the end of the day, and it's all free, by the way. Between now and next time, do me a favour and remember to look but never stare. Peace.